Hey, good evening, everybody. Dr. Nathan Thompson here with Exemplify Health Center, an affiliate of the Wellness Way. Happy Monday evening, guys. I hope you guys had a great, awesome weekend. I had a very busy weekend running around, watching volleyball 5 hours away. It's been it's been a pretty busy last 2 weeks, to say the least, which is why we're doing a question and answer, because quite honestly, I didn't have time to prepare anything. So wanted to give kind of shake things up a little bit and do a little bit of a question and answer. So if you guys are watching right now, either on YouTube, if you guys are watching on Facebook, just go ahead in the comments below and type a question in. And then I'll do my best to make sure that we answer it over the next couple of minutes. And guys, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you say hello and also let me know where you are watching from. I love to see where people are watching from all across the country. Even if you're watching on Instagram too, let me know where you're watching from. I love the fact that people watch from all over, not only the United States, but all over the world. So let me know, guys, that you are watching it. It certainly picks me up, especially when we have very long, difficult days. So before as we wait for some people to jump on, and again, ask your question in the comments, and then I'll be able to bring that question up and be able to answer it the best I can. If something I don't know, I'll also let you know that I don't know as well. All right. So while we wait for people to jump on, answer or ask those questions, guys, a couple of things. Number one, next inflammation talk is going to be coming up in about 2 weeks. So if you are from the Chicagoland area, just go to the top of the page. If you are on Facebook, and you can register for our next inflammation talk. Guys, we talked for about an hour and 15 minutes just on inflammation. People are blown away by it. And then we say, yeah, but inflammation is actually just the first thing that we really start handling first, because there's a lot of other things that you have to do after that fact. And so make sure, guys, that you go, inflammation is where you start first. This is why we always say, guys, it's like, if you keep skinning your knee every single day, it's not going to heal. Okay. And that's why once you can identify what can actually be causing the inflammation first and foremost, then maybe you don't have to be on a lifetime of, I don't know, pain medication or corticosteroids, blood pressure medication, even turmeric or boswellia. People are taking so many natural things, but they're still inflaming themselves because they don't understand what it is and where it actually is coming from. So if you are watching from the Chicagoland area, go up to the top of the page and register for our next inflammation talk. This is an in-person event, and get registered for that, especially if you want to work with us specifically in our Yorkville area. So thank you, Mark, for the kind words. I certainly appreciate that. From Batavia, Illinois, not very far from Yorkville. Thank you very much. Let's go over the next thing, guys. The next thing is, guys, we are hiring. All right. So we are hiring. We are hiring a full-time staff member in our office. And we have people who, do send the resumes quite a bit, but we are going through some growth, and we're going to be hiring. So if you want to specifically work in our office and be able to help lots of people, and you enjoy our approach, so we're going to be hiring. And so if you are from the area, this is a full-time position, so about 32 to 36 hours every single week. The hours aren't ideal, I will tell you that, but the mission is. So if you guys are watching, you're interested in working with us at our Yorkville, Illinois office, please, guys, send your resume to nathanthompsondc@gmail.com. Send the resume there. And we look forward to considering you being a part of our team here at the office. Guys, while we wait for people, and guys, again, submit your questions if you can. I see some questions that are coming in. One of them is this, and that's a great question, because was going to talk about it anyways, the idea behind food addiction. Okay. So food addiction is a real thing. And I've talked about food addiction for a very long time. I would probably say for the last 10 years at least. and how food, specifically, a lot of people are addicted to sugar, or you're addicted to ultra processed foods, which is going to include just a ton of carbohydrates, especially. They may call it hyper palatable food, very, great tasting food, but processed food. And guys, when you really think about it, processed food is going to contain a lot of refined carbs. A lot of processed food can also contain a lot of MSG, monosodium glutamate. Guys, here's what's interesting about MSG is people will argue with me online. They'll be like, yeah, but it's found in tomatoes, or it's found naturally in foods. Not specifically the manufactured monosodium glutamate. There are foods that do contain glutamate. It's an amino acid, but not monosodium glutamate, specifically the one that's made in a lab. And here's the interesting thing is a lot of people actually do have an allergy to yeast. They'll have an allergy to either baker's yeast or brewer's yeast. And clinically, one of the things that I have found is when they have a reaction to that yeast, they don't do very hot when it comes to MSG. So if you consume something high in MSG, that considered a flavor enhancer, also consider that you may be having an immune reaction to it, which is why one of the telltale signs of saying, hey, I'm not responding very well to MSG is you start getting some joint swelling as well. You may be getting some bloating. And that could actually be an allergy to the protein within the MSG. And baker's yeast allergy and brewer's yeast allergy are very, very common in people. That's why one of the things that we say is if you're going to consume alcohol, you want something that has the brewer's yeast distilled from it. And that would be, is there such thing as a clean alcohol? Things like a quadruple distilled or triple distilled vodka, or a triple distilled tequila, which is going to be a top shelf, considered a top shelf liquor. Okay. But, getting into this about the whole idea that people are addicted to food, there's a lot of people who they don't like that. They don't like that people can be addicted to food, because sometimes to some people who might be addicted to illicit drugs or to alcohol, or to work. I mean, you could be, guys, addicted to anything. You could be addicted to your phone that you're on right now. And how I would describe an addiction is knowing that it's not benefiting your health, or maybe even hurting your health, or maybe hurting relationship, and you cannot stop that habit. Okay. You can't stop it. Then at that point, I would say, full stop, this is considered an addiction. So they did a study. This is at the University of Michigan. They reported on a January 30th, I think, right around there, of 2023. And they found that 13%, or 1 in 8 of older adults, 50 to, I think, 84, they show signs of food addiction. Okay. So more than 2 or more signs of food addiction, but almost 50% of the people they surveyed, which was around, I want to say 2,800. So it was a fair amount of people, 2,800 people that they surveyed, almost 50% had at least one sign of food addiction. So one of the things that they talked about as far as food addiction was concerned, that they talked about, the fact that if they try to quit it, they have withdrawal. The fact that they have tried to stop, and no matter how hard they try, they can't. So intense cravings. So that was just 2 of the ones. And I think they had 4 that were considered the criteria. This is why, guys, if you say, hey, I want you to quit all processed sugar, if it makes you emotional, then chances are you probably have an addiction to it. It's almost like, you going somewhere to a party and they're saying, yeah, they're not going to have any alcohol, and people get upset about that. And if that upsets you, then you probably do have an addiction to it. So a lot of times when we think of addiction, we're thinking of drugs, or we're thinking alcohol, we're thinking of, marijuana. We're thinking of that, but I think it's been very glossed over the fact that a lot of people are in fact addicted to food. So it's very, very interesting. But one of the things from this study that was interesting is they really saw a correlation with their mental health and food addictions, meaning the worse their mental health got, the more likely they were addicted to food. And guys, that makes a lot of sense, because when you look at addiction, addiction is just replacing a hole in your heart. I mean, it really is. It's replacing something that you are seeking, something that you are searching for. And it may start off as doing that, but then it becomes this dopamine response, pleasure, reward. And the thing is, with any addiction, you need to do more in order to elicit the same ding, ding, ding in your brain, which is why when addictions continue to get worse and worse and worse. People ask me, well, how do you get rid of that? How do you get rid of a food addiction? Well, I am kind of old school, and I will say, just go cold turkey. All right. So, guys, I have been addicted to sugar massively, and when I was younger, and I could hide it because I played sports. So I obviously needed a high amount of energy input, and that was with a lot of sugar. But that also developed a lot of habits, because as soon as I quit sports, it would be like 25 pounds that would be gained literally within 2 to 3 months. And so I developed a lot of bad habits because we didn't know back then, 30 years ago, the addictive nature of ultra processed foods. Okay. So yes, going cold turkey. I know that we're seeing some questions come in, but I have a funny story for you. Because if you want to see the emotional aspect of food, and the fact that, yes, I believe that a lot of people are addicted to sugar, because a lot of people will say, well, I am so much better than you because I don't drink, I don't smoke. I'm not addicted to anything. But the moment that you tell them to give up sugar, then all of a sudden they become angry and emotional. And I'm like, there's your addiction right there. And in fact, I remember this was probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. I had the bright idea to do like a potluck, a recipe potluck at my church. And I told everyone to, here's your recipe. Go ahead and make that. These are no processed sugar. These are great recipes. It's going to be so good for you. And I had 5 recipes, and lo and behold, so many people were upset and angry that there wasn't going to be all of their sugar, at their potluck. I mean, there are people like they skipped and protest because of it. The interesting thing was afterwards, there was probably about 9 or 10 people who came up to me afterwards and apologized, and they said, I literally thought I was going to be eating cardboard, but in fact, I didn't know that actually healthy food could taste really good for you as well. So it was an interesting experiment, even way back then, to see the addictive nature of food and the emotional aspect of food. And guys, when you have type 2 diabetes, literally exploding insulin resistance, exploding, things like that, then you know that there is really, really an addiction. People do have an addiction to food. Sometimes people don't like that because they want to say, well, my addiction is better. Okay. They want to know, they want to have the best addiction. But guys, whether it's drugs or with alcohol, it can ruin your life. But guys, food can do the same too. Because if it is greatly impacting your health, impacting your joints, impacting your energy, impacting your hormones, then ultimately you are not becoming who you were created to be. And you are becoming a watered down, stripped down version of yourself. And I always think that that's a sad, sad story when that is happened. Okay. So let me go over a couple of questions, guys. If you haven't, keep these questions actually coming in. I know that we have people watching from Crivets, Wisconsin. Alice, how are you doing? Pitt Meadows, British Columbia, from BC. Sheila, how are you? From Yukon, Oklahoma. PJ Beck Bowden. Sherry Johnson from Edmonton, Alberta. Lots of people from Canada. Hello, Canadians. Batavia, Illinois. From Christiana, Tennessee. So Mr. Z, I think I know who that is. That would be my father-in-law. How you doing, Mr. Zierman? It's good to see you again. Good evening from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Food addiction is real. Yeah, this is a great comment. Food addiction is real. Had it all my life. Very tough to change things. Lost 55 pounds last 6 months. Started at 218 and now 163. Awesome job. Congratulations. Keep it up. That's all I have to say. One of the reasons why a lot of people will fail to follow through, and I've talked with this, with men when we do various like men's events, called the Man Up Challenge, and it's actually one of my favorite events to do. And I talked to the men. I said, you guys can do anything for 4 weeks, but can you do it for 4 years? And a lot of people, they have a hard time staying focused for that long. And I said, well, it's not as hard the longer you do it, because this becomes a new habit. Or I should say, maybe sometimes it becomes your new addiction. We are creatures of habit. You can replace a bad habit with a good habit, which is why my habit would be exercise. I mean, like, if I don't do it, I feel absolutely awful. Not physically, but I just feel like it's just something that needs to get done. Like it's just a part of my day. So Tomahawk, Wisconsin, from Chicago, from Bronx, New York. Welcome, guys. Let me know any questions that you might have. And I know that we have some questions on Instagram as well. Right now we're streaming also to Instagram. Here is one of the questions about selenium and Brazil nuts. Okay, here's what's interesting. So Brazil nuts have the highest amount of selenium in those. However, it's not considered the food that I would recommend for selenium. And one of the reasons why is because of nuts. Okay. So just because there's selenium in the nuts doesn't mean that you can necessarily unlock it, because there are specific nutrient binders known as phytic acids in them that bind those nutrients. This is why you can become nutrient deficient if you're eating a lot of nuts. So if you are going to get Brazil nuts, then one of the things that you can do, and a lot of people have heard of this before, is you can soak the nuts like in distilled water and soak them for about 24 hours and then let them dry. And then that way the nutrients will be a lot more available for it. If we put people on selenium, we put them on an actual capsule of it. But what's interesting is sometimes with some people, depending on their antibody levels, I have given 800 to 1,000 micrograms of selenium for those people, because there's so much thyroid damage that's actually taken place. Okay. So great question. Someone had a question on Instagram on mold and illness. Yeah. So mold, and we're not talking about just environmental mold, like, hey, the mold count is high today. We're talking about water damage mold. And it can definitely be a thing. No doubt about it. So how do you deal with mold? One of the first things when it comes to mold is before you do anything, if you have to see if you are in the environment. Okay. So you have to see if you are in the environment or not. And so that's the first thing I'm like, well, before you do anything, otherwise we're just going to be spinning our wheels. Go ahead and get your house tested, or if you think it's within your work environment, you can go ahead and get it tested. And so you have to get it tested in order to get a confirmation of whether it's there or not. Number one, you can get an ERMI test, ERMI test. And basically you just dust certain parts of your house, and then they will do, PCR testing on it and see if in fact there are specific types of mold that's associated with water damage. If you get a confirmation with that, then the next thing is figure out where the water damage is coming from. So this can come from windows. This can come from the roof. This can come from the basement. This can come from plumbing leaks. This can actually come from if your HVAC is not, if it's too humid. So that's why, controlling your humidity, this is why it's a lot bigger problem in the southeast, like in Florida or along the Gulf, because it's a lot more humid down there. And, so then at that point, you've got to look at your HVAC. And then while you're doing that, you can protect the mucous membranes, with silver. You can actually start binding some things if it's a 911 type emergency. And then the next thing that you would do is actually run a mold test, which is a urine test, and then look for what is inside of the body. And there are certain things that you can do depending on the type of mold that it is when it comes to binders, when it becomes to removal of it. The first thing we say is you got to get out of the situation first and foremost, and then you can start removing it. Now, for 20 or 76% of the people, you get it out of the environment and they recover. 24% of people, they can't make an antibody to the mold toxin. And this is why they get so sick, is because they'll have these innate immune system reactions all the time, which is a very non-specific, a very strong immune system reaction, because they don't have that sniper specific adaptive immune system response, which is why they have all of these issues when it comes to like gastrointestinal inflammation, kidney inflammation, problems with brain fog, problems with their melatonin levels. They have a very systemic reaction that's taking place. You can actually test to see if you can make antibodies to it. But like I said, it can be as easy as getting out of the situation for 76% of people, and the other 24%, when they can't make an antibody to it, that mold will stay inside of them. So they have to do some things in order to help with the mold removal. And getting into the specifics can take a very, very long time. But basically helping with melatonin, helping the liver remove it, all of those things can take place. And even sometimes you got to go backwards and shore up the gastrointestinal system, because that's where you're actually detoxing from as well. Okay. So great question. Facebook, here is another question. Is this one too? What type of testing is offered by your company? Is it blood work? Because I'm not sure if New York allows me to send blood work with an MD prescription to a lab. That's a great question. New York is terrible. What kind of testing do we do? Well, first off, it's not my company. It's the Wellness Way. And we actually just use labs. So we don't, we have no affiliation with the labs or anything like that. And so the blood testing, we use Access Labs, which is a great cash-only lab. And when we test some of the things, the difference in price can literally be about 10% of what an insurance company will actually charge. So we use different blood testing, immunolabs for food allergy testing, Genova we use for stool testing, Precision Analytics we use for the Dutch test, and we even do some other lab companies that involve things like urinalysis and neurotransmitter testing as well. So we actually use a lot of different lab companies, and sometimes we'll even switch. So if we find that there is a better lab company that offers a better test, or if they can offer it at a better price for our patients, then we'll switch. And that's why we have switched for like stool testing, for example. We switched a couple of years ago, switched companies because they were just offering a more comprehensive test when it comes to the stool. Getting back to New York, though, if someone needs to work in New York, then usually what you have to do is go out of state and get some of the tests, if they're take-home tests, get it shipped to a PO box out of state, and then you just have to bring it in and then take the test. So a lot of times you have to go out of state, but I don't know what's wrong with New York, but it is absolutely awful. Okay. All right, Carrie, that's a great question though, because a lot of people ask me what tests should I get or how do I get those? And I always say, guys, work with the Wellness Way doctor, because they can coordinate the testing for you. That's why, where you should go is you should go to www.thewellnessway.com. Find a doctor close to you. There's also doctors who can have the availability to be able to work remotely with you as well. I do work remotely with some people, and we just coordinate the labs for the blood draw to be done at like a LabCorp, or some of the companies will drop ship the testing to you unless you're in New York. All right. So if you're in New York, it takes it a little bit. It's a little bit more dicey, especially. Carrie Robertson asked a question. I live in a basement full of black mold for a year. 3 of my cats died within a year, and I've not felt right since. Well, there you go of how toxic that it is. Where do you get the mold from? Or specifically, where can you have exposure to the mold? Well, I want you to think of it most of the time when you're talking about in a home or in an office, you're breathing it in. So it's coming in through the sinus passages, and it's also coming in through the throat. That's why when you look at some of the symptoms, I have a dry, scratchy throat. My sinuses feel always full and congestion, because that's where the route and method of entry. You can actually have mold growing within the sinuses as well. But you can also get mold from your foods too. So that's why mold can cause some gastrointestinal issues. You can get mold in coffee. You can get mold with a lot of boxed like cereals and grains and things like that. And yes, the fact that 3 of your cats died. Black mold is the worst. It is the absolute worst. And then when you test it on an ERMI test, it will give you a score or give you a reading of saying, hey, like you need to move out of the house right now. So it will give you a score as far as how bad that it actually is. So yeah, I think that the number of people that are responding with mold, I think we just kind of open a can of worms here. Yeah. So, and if it's behind the wall, that can be a plumbing leak and you won't see it. So, but the other thing is too, is anyone who is going to take the drywall off with suspected mold is, in this case, you probably should wear a mask. All right. Because you don't want to inhale the spores. They're very tiny. And literally like thousands of them can fit on the head of a pin. Okay. Brain fog definitely can be a symptom of mold. Another interesting thing when it comes to mold too is thirst. Thirst, because it will actually really, really mess up with antidiuretic hormone. And so one of the telltale signs, frequent urination and thirst can be a huge, huge sign. Okay. How about this question from Dennis from YouTube? I take 4 grams a day of omega-3 fatty acids with a ratio of DHA, EPA of 3:1. Is this a good dose? So the ratio is good. 4 grams, whether someone needs 4 grams or not, I will tell you this. We do put some people on omega-3 fatty acids for a couple of reasons. Number one, to lower triglycerides. Number two, if they have some high inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. Another marker that you will see is like high platelets. So high inflammation, you will see your blood will get more quote unquote sticky. 4 grams a day and that can also be on how much you weigh, how big you are, things like that. Usually I'll do 2. Sometimes I'll do 3. I have put people on as high as 6 grams of omega-3 fatty acids per day. The only thing that it can do is that it can, you can, after about 3 grams, can run into some issues with thinning the blood a little bit, or, interfering with the blood clotting. However, high dose fish oil, there's actually research, high dose fish oil for psychosis before. There's fantastic, amazing research, guys, that's out there. When you talk about mental illness, guys, there's so much stuff out there. In fact, a lot of the research studies that you aren't going to be aware of, they aren't done in the United States. Okay, let me say that again. They're not done in the United States. Might be done in like India or in a different country. For example, if you go to PubMed and you look at some of the research on things like licorice, astragalus, they're not done here in the United States. They're done in other countries, because it seems like just in the United States, the only thing that they're really doing any kind of studies on is on medication. Okay. So medication. That's why you look at the study on how astragalus can actually help with restoration of disc tissue, for example. But you never see any spine surgeon telling someone that, hey, you need motion and you also need, astragalus, and, you need those specific sugars in order to feed those chondrocytes to help regrow the disc as well. But other things too, is, as far as, guys, even, people suffering with mental illness. And I've said this time and time, the symptoms are 100% real. Same thing with ADHD. The symptoms are 100% real, but people want to argue about why they need to be on some kind of amphetamine or some kind of stimulant, or whether a slow release type stimulant. They want to argue for their limitation and say, hey, maybe if you looked here, for example, look at a histamine response in the brain. Look at some people who may have a gene mutation that prevents the degradation of things like adrenaline, like a COMT gene mutation. People have heard of MTHFR gene mutations. A lot of people haven't heard of COMT. You can actually measure this by swabbing the inside of your cheek and looking at some of these genetic mutations. We've done this on people, but guys, if you can't break down your catecholamines, those things, you have a stress response, they stay in your body and they are not broken down, which means you have a prolonged stress response for such a long period of time. So I think that the 4 grams are good. You might want to get some blood tests, in order to see, look at platelets and C-reactive protein and things like that. Because yes, and also the quality of the fish oil is going to make a huge difference too. So I know that when we're recommending kind of fish oil, it's krill oil. And you want to make sure, I've even seen some fish oils that if you break open the capsule and you put it on top of a styrofoam cup, it can actually dissolve the styrofoam. And that way you're probably not looking at a great source. Another great source is cod liver oil as well. Okay. All right. So let's see if we can get any more questions from Instagram. Anything on cryotherapy? Yes. I did a video, or I did a short video. I've done a long version video too, actually saying why I don't ice. And we're talking about injuries. And people just lost their mind. And I was taught to ice. It was just what we were taught. Even going through school is taught to ice. I got my undergraduate in sports medicine, 1,800 hours of internship, under an orthopedic surgeon. It was all ice and electrical stimulation therapy, and no one got better. But the whole idea behind ice is, as I say this as I've gotten older, I'm like, man, this goes against everything I've been taught. But acute inflammation, guys, is actually good. I mean, if you have an injury, then acute inflammation is good and it's needed. And I remember I had a grade 3 tear of my hamstring, and I said, you know what, I'm going to put it to the test. I'm not going to ice this. And it got terribly swollen. It got terribly bruised. I mean, the whole back of my leg was black. And the only thing that I did is I started moving it very quickly. So I started getting motion back into it very quickly. And I remember within 2 weeks, I was back to jogging and deadlifting again, even though the back of my leg was completely black. And normally when you have an injury like that, all the textbooks say, oh, it's going to take you anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks in order to recover from it. But I was almost back to full speed within 2 weeks and pretty much healed at 3 weeks. And I think it was just because I didn't interfere with the inflammatory process. So on Instagram, I'm going to say like cryotherapy. Now we might be talking about something maybe a little bit different. So if you're going into a cryotherapy, if you're going into like the cryo tubes, that they go in and they shoot nitrogen gas, cold nitrogen gas into it, and you're sitting at about 140. I've done it before, negative 140 degrees, and it is very painful to do, and it is absolutely wonderful to do as well, only because you basically just cause blood to leave the extremities, blood to go back to the organs, and then once you get out, to cycle back to the extremities. So yes, it does have an awesome anti-inflammatory effect. And then this is why you see people doing cold plunges, and then also doing sauna, and they're alternating between the two. That can have an awesome effect. I have no problems with people doing it. I have a sauna unit in my office, and I also have done cryotherapy, and man, it was amazing. But this was also going back 6 or 7 years when I was extremely inflamed and I didn't know why. So once I understood what was causing so much inflammation, then one of the things that I did is starting to do that. And then the more I did it, the less I had a need to be doing those things. So I don't have a problem with people doing cryotherapy or sauna, but I just want people to consider it as an add-on. It's kind of like, don't add the sand until you add the rocks first. Because if you add the sand first, the rocks won't fit into the base. But if you add the rocks first, then the sand will actually fit. So I don't have any problems with people doing it, but it's like there's other things that you can do to maybe where you don't necessarily have a need to be doing it all the time. But that is a really awesome question because a lot of people ask that. And I, like I said, don't have a problem with it, but there's other things that you can do that will actually make you feel like you don't necessarily have a need for it as well. So let's see if we can answer a couple more questions. What are your thoughts on oil pulling and xylitol toothpaste? For some reason, it doesn't show that. The xylitol toothpaste. Oil pulling. Yeah. Oh, there it is. It's scrolling. All right, cool. So oil pulling. Yep. So go ahead and put coconut oil and swish it in your mouth for 15 to 20 minutes. Yes, it will whiten the teeth. Yes, it will actually strengthen the teeth. I've done it. I've done it quite a bit. I haven't done it in a while. Maybe I should do it again. That reminds me to start oil pulling again. And just make sure that if you are doing oil pulling with coconut oil, because it will be solid, it will melt in your mouth. Please don't spit it down the drain because when you spit it out, it will become solid again and it will clog your plumbing. So make sure that, if you do it, you spit it in and put it into the garbage. And then xylitol toothpaste. Yes. So I have not used fluoride toothpaste for, I don't know, probably close to 20 years. And so xylitol toothpaste is just sweetened with xylitol as a sweetener. So I don't use a toothpaste that uses fluoride, and I also don't use a toothpaste that contains sodium lauryl sulfate, which gives it the sudsy, type of thing. There's a big difference between using a natural toothpaste and then also using, like Crest with sodium lauryl. It will fizz up a ton. So no problems with doing that. I haven't used fluoride for a very, very long time. So great question. What is the best strategy to reduce systemic inflammation? Stage 4 breast cancer, keto diet, water only fast for 30 days, no drinking, no smoking, CRP is still high. That is a really good question because there's a lot of things to unpack when it comes to this. So number one, systemic inflammation. If you still have high C-reactive protein after doing all that, there is probably an infection that's still hanging out somewhere. I would probably check your stool and see if there is some kind of bacterial infection. I would be doing a stool test. Systemic inflammation. Also probably do a food allergy test and actually analyze barrier function as well. Because if you are getting if you're not breaking down your food proteins very well, and then also barrier function of the GI system is not doing very good, it's letting a lot of things through, then one of the things that's going to happen is you are going to have an immune reaction to the foods that you are eating. And that can cause things like very systemic inflammation, brain fog, joint pain, swelling, things like that. And so keto diet, and people ask me, do you recommend a keto diet? I'm like, well, it really, really, really depends. Please don't ever do the keto diet if you don't have a gallbladder. You are going to run into so many issues as well. Water fasting. Here's the thing, why people feel better with fasting is because you're not involving the immune system and digestive system at all. So if they say, I feel so much better, I lose a lot of weight when I fast, I lose a lot of swelling when I fast, I lose a lot of bloating when I fast, it's like, well, then there's a problem in the GI system. And so when people say, yeah, it's anti-inflammatory, not really, as much as you're not causing an inflammatory reaction. And so that's why, if you're just talking about inflammation and fasting, that could be the reason why Not only that, but there's some other benefits with autophagy and the immune system, and how the body gets rid of any like senescent cells or any cells that just not working the way that they're supposed to, getting kind of old, and it just cleans all of that stuff up. So yeah, I am a fan of fasting, but I also say, like, at some point you're going to have to introduce food so you can still have the anti-inflammatory effects from fasting by actually checking a food response, and then helping to reestablish healthy barrier function when it comes to your food, and avoiding those food allergies, lowering an IgG allergy response to it. So if you still have high CRP, then there still is probably an infection that's taking place. And that's why, trying to figure out why there was breast cancer in the first place is you got to check your immune system, do an advanced immune system panel like a CD8, CD4, CD19, CD56, and also look at like things like CEA, carcinogenic embryonic antigen, to see for any kind of abnormal high tissue growth that's taking place in the body. And then for women with breast cancer too, we are always doing a Dutch test, because there are certain estrogens. And I say estrogens, guys, because there's no such thing as estrogen. Estrogen describes a family of estrogens. And you have 10 different estrogens, and they can estriol, estrone, estradiol can metabolize into things like 2 and 4 hydroxy, 2 and 4 methoxy. They get metabolized. And so 2 hydroxy, or 4 hydroxy, I should say, is very damaging to the DNA of breast tissue. So that's the first thing, is don't damage the breast tissue. But then you have a backup system, that being your immune system and those CD8 cells that are tumor suppressing cells. Those two things, if those are low, then it's a recipe for breast tumor formation that's taking place. So I would say, looking at this, please work with the Wellness Way doctor. They can kind of guide and navigate you kind of through this whole process. Okay. Let's see this one here. I haven't read this one, so we'll see how it works. I ended up with blood clots legs when I fully ruptured my Achilles 2 years ago. The ortho instructed me to keep the leg immobile and not put any weight on it. Ended up with 2 blood clots in that leg, not like 5 weeks after rupture. That definitely is possible because anytime that you don't move something and you're not pumping the calves, and you're allowing blood venous return to go back up, back to the heart, then you just have blood that can just stay there. And that's why it's easy to get a clot in through the leg by being immobile. That's why, they say flying or sitting for long periods of time. That's why if you're in a hospital, they try to get you up as much as possible in order to be able to move the legs and to be able to dorsiflex, plantar flex the calves in order to get blood moving, because you don't want that blood just staying there, because blood that doesn't move will clot. Now, here's what's also interesting is you can also be much more likely to clot. For example, if you are on hormone replacement therapy that involves estrogens or birth control as well. If you look at birth control and blood clotting, that's actually a warning sign. It's a side effect of being on birth control. So, that's why there could have been something else that was happening with that as well. But that's why I've even seen, I had a friend, he had a complete rupture of the Achilles, and he actually did not have it reattached and got pretty much full function back to it. It's absolutely crazy, from doing that. But I've also heard that a ruptured Achilles tendon is one of the most painful things that you could ever go through. So congratulations on going one of the most painful things ever in your life. All right. Any other questions, guys? How do you know if you are buying high quality vitamins? That's a good question, guys. How do you know if you are buying high quality vitamins? Yeah, this is a complaint that a lot of people will say is that the supplement industry is not regulated very well. So they say it's not regulated very well. First of all, I would say this is that I'm not a fan of people taking a multivitamin in general. Okay. That's not to say that there aren't decent multivitamins that are out there, but I will say that the best, nature's multivitamin is actually liver. Okay. So it's actually liver. So that's why we put a lot of people on either a desiccated liver, which is a dried liver in capsules, or you can actually eat liver as well. The reason why is things like liver is going to have iron. It's going to have zinc. It's going to have copper. It's going to have CoQ10. It's going to have B vitamins. It's going to have vitamin A. It's going to have vitamin E in it. It is literally nature's multivitamin, and it really is considered a food. Now, people will say, well, Dr. Nate, isn't the liver, isn't that a dirty organ? No, it's not a dirty organ. Although the ones that I recommend are grass-fed, grass-finished cows from New Zealand. Because yes, if you are eating liver from something that's conventionally raised in the United States, you can be eating a fatty liver because they're fed nothing but grains. However, livers aren't dirty organs. They're not toxic organs. Toxins aren't stored in the liver. Toxins are metabolized in the liver, but where your toxins are stored is in fat cells. Okay. So it's not stored in the liver. All the liver does is convert from the fat, convert it into water, and then excretes it through bile and through the gastrointestinal system. And so that's why the liver isn't considered a dirty organ. So I would say eat more liver instead. Now, are there some just absolutely, for want of a better word, crappy vitamin companies? The answer is yes, that there is. So if you are buying vitamins, then one of the things that you should do is look on the label, and you should see if they follow good manufacturing practices, GMP. So GMP, good manufacturing practices, which means that they'll actually manufacture similar to the pharmaceutical companies when they're manufacturing drugs with that level of stringency. Even with our supplements that we have when it comes to the herbs and the things like that, we actually invite any lab, to come in and or any person to do any kind of third-party testing, because we already do it. And so we're just like, come on in, do your expose, and we'll have no problems with, proving the efficacy, the potency, and the purity of what is on the label. So that's how you know if you're buying quality vitamins. But I say if you're interested in a vitamin, consider getting either eating liver about 6 ounces at least per week, or if you don't want to eat it like me, just take it in a pill form that has been dried and then it's in a capsule. Okay. So any other questions? Let's see. I know that we're at about 50 minutes. I appreciate you guys being on. It is so awesome to be able to talk to you guys. I really, really appreciate it. From Instagram, I have a food addiction. Congratulations. You're honest. All right. A lot of people don't want to be honest with it. What's up with mushroom coffee? Is it better than coffee? Not necessarily, depending on, what it's for. So medicinal mushrooms are awesome. Medicinal mushrooms are amazing. If you guys actually see some of the research that came out from the University of Texas at Houston Medical Center, and they talked about the role of medicinal mushrooms, one of the active components, AHCC, and the how it helped the immune system to completely clear HPV, which is considered a viral infection that is involved, if it is left unchecked, can cause cervical cancer. So medicinal mushrooms are awesome. They're amazing. You have things like reishi, you have things like chaga, you have turkey tail, you have, gosh, there's so many of them. Those are primarily the 3 that I use the most. Is going to cordyceps is another one. Those 4 are primarily what I use the most. And again, the mushrooms have antiviral properties to them. And also they help, how they strengthen the immune system is they're feeding the thymus, and that's where your T cells are actually maturing. So that's why they call it T cells, because thymus is where they mature. Okay. So mushroom coffee is just using medicinal mushrooms. And so I would say that is really awesome. But there's also some health benefits when it comes to, coffee from the coffee bean. Okay. My husband has been diagnosed from Instagram with Hashimoto's. It's been a challenge. Most doctors they want to give you levothyroxine and they push you out the door. I have zero guidance. What is your suggestion? Well, this is interesting because it is not as often that you're going to see a male diagnosed with Hashimoto's than you would a female. So females are diagnosed a lot more with Hashimoto's than men are. I have seen it in men. But here's the thing, guys. If you have a diagnosis of Hashimoto's, this comes down to the thyroid. When it comes to the thyroid, people say, well, why don't doctors test a little bit deeper? And I'm saying, well, they really don't need to if the only solution is going to be to put you on a hormone. So that's the only solution. So, if all you have is a hammer, then everything is just going to look like a nail. So if they've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, the first thing is you want to figure out what is causing that increased antibody response. So my wife was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. Her antibodies were at 2,600, which is really high. We tested someone about 2 weeks ago whose TPO antibodies were over 11,000, it's the highest I've ever seen. So there's a lot of different factors that can be at play when it comes to Hashimoto's. There can be a lot of oxidative damage that's taking place. So consider selenium. The other thing is when it comes to Hashimoto's, please get him off of all wheat gluten. That is without question. He probably needs a food allergy test. In addition to that, there may be a viral component to it. If you look at Epstein-Barr virus and how it infects cells, it can infect thyroid cells, and that's going to cause some thyroid destruction. Anytime a cell is damaged or infected, it will flag on the membrane and say, hey, immune system, get rid of me. I'm sick or I am infected. Heck, even cancer cells do, like a lot of cancer cells will do that too. So that's why if there is a lot of infected cells or a lot of damaged cells, all the immune system is doing is it's doing exactly what it's programmed to do. It's not a mistake of the immune system as much as you need to figure out why there's damage that's actually taking place. So usually food, you may need to get a stool test. And you have to figure out maybe even a viral panel too, and be looking at some reoccurrences of chronic viral infections that can take place. Does he need to be on levothyroxine? Here's the interesting thing is that woman who was on a high dose of levothyroxine, her antibody levels were at 11,000. She was at a high dose and she was converting very little of it. Because remember, it's just T4, but your body uses T3. T4 into T3, which means there's a conversion that needs to take place. And most of that is actually happening in the liver. So most conversions taking place in the liver. Well, this woman wasn't converting at all because she also had hepatitis. So massive liver inflammation. So the liver was just not working the way that it's supposed to. Also had elevated liver enzymes. And people say, well, Dr. Nate, how can you treat something like that? We're not treating necessarily anything. But also remember, they're coming to me because they have gotten absolutely zero answers other than just take another medication. So Daniela, when it comes to your husband, we're pulling for him. Really, really work with the Wellness Way doctor. Go to thewellnessway.com. See if you can find a doctor close to you in the area who can work with you remotely. And then just promise me, please get back to me and let me know that he's getting well taken care of. All right. All right. Another, why does the flu season occur? Guys, I've thought about doing a reel, an Instagram reel on this, and also put it on TikTok. And I guarantee you, some people are going to try to just absolutely excoriate me for saying this. But here's what's so interesting. Look in 2020, 2021, and look what happened to the flu season. It was literally non-existent. Makes one of those things that make you go, it didn't happen. The CDC didn't even count cases at that point. They said they were so low, we just didn't count them. And so it just makes you wonder, well, how accurate was all of this testing that was getting done? Huh. Now it's come back. And also, the FDA also changed the testing. I believe it was in 2022. And I have actually the FDA announcement, it was the FDA announcement that said, we're now going to differentiate on the PCR testing the difference between the flu and then also the testing. So they changed the testing in order to better differentiate between the flu and then COV, et cetera, et cetera. So does a flu season truly occur? Nah. Well, it's a low vitamin D. It is indoors, and it's also high sugar and high stress. All of those things lower the immune system, which makes you more susceptible to any kind of virus, whether it's a flu or a bacteria or anything like that. That's why when people say, oh, it's, the strep season. So-and-so got strep. They got strep throat. Well, give Johnny 100 grams of processed sugar and you will see neutrophil function that is responsible for clearing out a bacteria. You will see that the function of those neutrophils dramatically goes down for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. It doesn't decrease the amount of cells, it decreases the function. So you just have basically feed a bacteria, feed it sugar, and then not allow the immune system to be able to handle it, and you're going to see the the bacteria start to proliferate. Well, then 4 hours later, another 100 grams of sugar, and then it's happening. And then it's no wonder we get bacterial infections, or we call it a flu season. All it is that the immune system goes down with what we're doing when it comes to our lifestyle. So I always will say this: 2 people they get the same virus, one dies and the other one gets the sniffles. It's the same doggone virus. And what's the difference? The strength of the host. And this is why no one talks about this when it comes to healthcare, is they say, avoid, weaken the environment so to suit a weakened person. And I say, no, that's not right. Strengthen the person to be able to withstand any environment. And this is one of the biggest challenges that I have to healthcare, about how it weakens the person to a weakened environment. It's no different than doing this, guys. It's like saying, well, I guess I need to go from a cane and then to a walker and then to a wheelchair and then bedridden. And I say, no. If you need a cane, work on not needing it again. Strengthen your body to withstand any environment. But we are taught that once we reach a certain age, then what we need to do is just quietly go in the night. And it's the same thing. Well, doctors will never give you a reason why you caught a virus or you caught a bacterial, and they'll offer no insight on what it takes in order to actually start to strengthen the immune system. Okay. Is there a wellness way in Canada? Carrie, great question. No, there is not, because of your prime minister. All right. As soon as they relax some of the guidelines and things like that, I guarantee you we will have doctors within that area. So let me know, Carrie, though, is we may be able to have some doctors who would be willing to travel up there and hold some seminars and things like that, try to help people as much as possible. So reach out to me if that's something that you guys could throw together. I know that we've had people from British Columbia and from Toronto and from some other cities too, that have asked to come and speak. Now that has been relaxed a little bit, we come and speak. But as far as opening an office, getting things across the border is really, 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 really tough. Will someone have food allergies for the rest of their life? The same food allergies? No. Depends on what kind of food allergy it is. If it's an IgE food allergy, those things can hang around for a very long time. I've seen them go down, and that is when they're like a +1 or a +2. But if someone has something that's causing an overt anaphylactic reaction, you might have that for the rest of your life. Like we're talking about like a +4 or a +5, but I've seen +1s go away. When it comes to an IgG food allergy, it's a different immune system response. And yes, how you can lose that IgG food allergy response is to avoid the foods. That's the easy thing to do. But then you also need to make sure that my barrier function is getting better so that I don't switch the food and then create all kinds of new food allergies. A lot of times when people, one of the things that they'll say is, yeah, it just means you have exposure. Yeah, that's the issue, is that whole proteins, it just means they're not getting broken down, which means the stomach's not breaking down the proteins the way that they're supposed to, number one. And then number two, for some reason, the GI barrier is allowing those things to be able to go through. And that also is not supposed to happen. It's a selective barrier. So when people say it's exposure, they don't understand the gastrointestinal barrier and then also basic physiology when it comes to your stomach is supposed to turn your proteins into amino acids by breaking the bonds because the immune system doesn't respond to amino acids, but it will respond to large chain proteins. Now, here's what your body does. When you have exposure, you can't continue to make antibodies for the rest of your life, or else your blood would be filled with antibodies all the time. So your body will then get rid of those antibodies the longer you go without exposure. So that's why when you look at certain types of testing, like for a virus, for example, you'll see the immune response ramp up, the antibody response, and then over time it actually goes down. And this is actually where, when it comes to a virus, you actually do have memory T cells that sit at the area of infection, getting ready for a sniper specific response when you have exposure again. So yes, you can lose those food allergies. I've tested mine 5 times. It took me 4 years in order to lose an egg response to egg yolk and egg white. I literally, at one point about 5 years ago, could not eat. I would get terrible, terrible joint pain. And then I would also bloat like no one's business when I would have a 3 or 4 egg omelet within 2-3 hours. And I would also put on about 10 pounds of just water retention. So it was absolutely amazing. But it took me 4 years to get rid of it. And now I can have eggs in moderation. Okay. Here's the last question, guys, that I'm going to take. Maybe I'll answer one more too. Is why are there negative side effects of the vaccine happening? Oh no, I don't know if I can say that word. Can we call it the thing? All right. The thing. Well, the first thing I would ask is, well, which one? Okay. But I think I know what we're talking about in this current climate. All I will tell you with this, without getting banned on this platform, go to my Rumble page at Dr. Nathan Thompson. Go to Rumble. It's an alternative platform to YouTube because YouTube took this down. Rumble will not. And I have a webinar that I did, and it's called Make Immune System Strong Again. So go to Rumble, download the app. You can create an account. It's free. It's awesome. It's an alternative YouTube. Awesome video platform. And I have a webinar called Make Immune System Strong Again. And for about the last 25 to 30 minutes, I go over all of the research as far as why there are so many side effects. And the thing that I can say is this, okay, is the spike protein belongs at the barrier like a natural method of infection. It doesn't belong bypassing the barrier because you have ACE2 expression systemically in the body. So you have ACE2 expression, which is actually the receptor that the spike protein binds to, or the virus binds to as well, if it's the whole virus. But ACE2 expression. So it happens in the lungs. That's the method of entry. You also have it within the gastrointestinal system. You have ACE2 expression within the brain. You have ACE2 expression within the vascular system. You have ACE2 receptors in the heart. Okay, you know where I'm going with this. ACE2 receptors in the ovaries. ACE2 receptors in the testicles. You have ACE2 receptors all over the body. And so what can happen if you have the spike protein attaching to an ACE receptor in the heart? Well, then, of course, it's going to cause an inflammatory reaction. So you know where I'm going with this. So if it's binding within the vascular system, you know where I'm going with this. And that's why an infection belongs at the barrier and the protein doesn't belong systemically in the body. And it will also make you wonder, okay? It will also make you wonder that it's not just for this thing, but we've also been doing it quite a bit over the last 40 years. And it used to be 8, and now it's about 106. And guys, all you have to do is just go and look at autoimmunity, neurodegenerative illness from 1960 until now, and you will see a sharp increase around that time. Well, Dr. Nate, correlation doesn't equal causation. You're right, but that is a correlation that we need to be looking into. Just because correlation doesn't equal causation doesn't mean that you shouldn't look into it as well. And the reason why is because a lot of people will say, well, look, we don't have all of these communicable diseases now. And I said, well, now you just told me correlation equals causation, because what also has happened during that same time span is better sanitation as well. There's many variables that are at play in here, but if you are seeing this, it's something that we need to look at. And what's interesting is when they refuse to look at it, maybe they're hiding something. Just my 2 cents. Okay. All right. So one last question. Any helpful advice? And I apologize, guys. I haven't seen all of your questions because they're streaming through. And if I happen to be talking, I might not be able to see it. So if I haven't seen your question, I really, really apologize. Any kind of helpful info for someone that suffers with rosacea? This is the last question, and then I got a jet. Any helpful advice someone suffers with rosacea? Yes. Okay. Rosacea is not a problem that requires some magical serum to put on your skin. Rosacea is an inflammatory reaction that's happening in other places in through the body. So with rosacea, the biggest thing that I would tell you is there's got to be an inflammatory response that's happening in the gastrointestinal system. And what's interesting, guys, is when the GI system inflames, and if you look at the immunology behind there, it will actually also send an immune response to underneath the skin, which is why you guys will see changes with the skin when it comes to the gastrointestinal system. That's why there's a gastrointestinal component to eczema. There's a gastrointestinal component to rosacea. There's a gastrointestinal component to even acne as well. So that's one of the things. If you're seeing that that's happening, do a stool test, do a food test, and then make sure you're also feeding the skin as well. Things like vitamin A can be very, very important when it comes to that. And then, yes, I'm not opposed to actually putting some things on skin because rosacea will cause a breakdown of the skin. One of the things that I actually do put on my skin is colloidal silver after a shower. There's actually a wonderful thing that you can put on the skin too that helps to strengthen the barriers of the skin, and it's known as Ion. It's ION, and it's a skin spray. It's also Ion that you can do in order to help with barrier function within the gut. That's you take that orally. They even have it for pets, and so if your pet is old and wearing down and you're seeing that their coat is not very good and the gastrointestinal function is not doing very good, they even have Ion for pets that you can put in the water. It doesn't taste really like anything. And so you're going to put Ion on the skin. You can put Ion, you can actually drink it. And it's awesome. And it just helps to strengthen the barriers. Okay. One last question, and then I promise you I'm going to go. Thanks, guys, for sticking with me. Redware ORAC value is way over $3,000. ORAC value, $300,000. Some acids in it I've never heard of. Seems to give me good energy, especially when fasting. Cloves. Okay, cloves. Yeah. So, ORAC as far as nutritional value. Yeah. So cloves. I don't deal with them all that much. My opinion probably isn't super valuable to you, but something that has a high ORAC value and cloves, guys. There's so many wonderful things that will have high nutrition content. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Guys, even like dandelion root has tremendous nutrition in it. People just think, well, you're take it for kidney function, better liver function. I have high liver enzymes. Dandelion root is actually a wonderful source of potassium, magnesium, and B vitamins. That's what a lot of people don't realize is that, yeah, even some of the herbs have wonderful sources of vitamins, minerals, and things like that. So, yeah, that's why, people say, where do I get my vitamins and minerals from? Where do I get calcium from? I'm like, does it grow from the ground? Yes. Well, then there's going to be minerals in it and there's going to be vitamins in it as well. So people will say, where do I get my calcium from? And I'm like, well, broccoli has calcium. You don't necessarily have to get it from dairy. Okay. So guys, I appreciate all of your questions. Make sure you guys share this video. Next week, I think what I might be doing is going over fasting as well. So I may be talking about fasting. A lot of people have questions about it, so I may be doing that live next Monday. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. Please share this video. And if you don't, please make sure that you like our page, make sure that you follow our page. And we're always putting out great content. And I appreciate guys when you share. As always, be well, be awesome, be healthy. Remember who you are. Be strong and be bold. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for your health freedoms as well. Guys, be well.